Hi again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of RV Business Capital Talk, sponsored by Eric Sell. I'm Rick Kessler from RV Business. Also from RV Business is Sherman Goldenberg. And joining the two of us this afternoon, we have Phil Ingrassia, Executive Director of the RV Dealers Association, and Jason Rano, Vice President at RVIA in charge of the government affairs. And that's why we have these two gentlemen on the program today. We're going to talk about advocacy and government affairs and all those wonderful things that are currently occupying the headlines on a minute by minute basis. Thank you, boys.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
Well,
Thank you. Thanks.
let's start right off with one of the specific issues that we've been trying to get passed federally for quite a few years anyway, and that is the travel trailer, or I'm sorry, the Camper and Travel Trailer Parity Act. Phil, this involves the RV dealers. So could you give us just a quick explanation of what that issue is?
Sure. In 2017, when they passed the Tax Cut and Job Act, through a drafting error in the conference committee, they removed the reference to travel trailers and just called it self-propelled vehicles, which means that the travel trailer dealers of a certain size are unable to fully deduct floor plan interest on their taxes, while motor vehicles, including motorhomes, are still fully deductible on floor plan. So this is really a tax fairness issue. It's been a bipartisan issue every year since this occurred, and we've been trying to clean it up. And now with this tax reconciliation package, they're going to try to extend those 2017 tax cuts, make them move forward. This is a great opportunity for the industry to get this fixed, and it's really our issue. You know, it's so narrow that it's RV dealers, manufacturers, and industry stakeholders who have to get involved in this.
One of the things, and I'm going to reference last week's RVIA leadership conference, and that was a really good panel discussion, or several good panel discussions. One that comes to mind right away was Jared McGee, the mayor of all things Funtown RV, and he mentioned this issue specifically. And do you remember? I think he said it's costing him upwards of $20 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, it depends on the size of the dealership, obviously, and there's every dealership is different. But you know, we did a study with Moss Adams, which is a CPA firm that does work for a lot of dealers. And on our website, you can kind of see the impact it can have. Because the mix now at most RV dealerships is the volume is in towables, so it really can make a big difference. And it can be, you know, as $15,000 maybe, or you know, $500,000, or in Jared's case, with a very, very large dealership, millions of dollars. So it's an important issue. This is really our opportunity to work together on this. And Jason and his team have been really involved in it and are helping. We're working together to get the message out to the dealers, because we've got to get out beyond Indiana and hit some of the members of Congress beyond that. Right, Jason?
Absolutely. You know, our membership at RVIA is highly concentrated in one congressional district, right? And we're thrilled to have Congressman Yakum as the lead Republican sponsor on this bill. He's been a great champion the last few years for us, along with Congresswoman Titus from Las Vegas on the Democratic side. But to Phil's point, you know, it's only us. It's the dealers and the manufacturers. It's our two memberships that are the cavalry. There's no broad coalition on this, but we are working hand in glove together. And to Phil's point, it's important to broaden the base of support. And so leveraging dealerships across the country has been a key to pushing this forward. And we're in the late stages of launching a grassroots tool, which will allow dealers to go into a system, point and click, and send a letter to their member of Congress, because that is going to move the needle. And as Phil said, this is our best shot. That Congress is highly focused on taking action to make sure that the 2017 tax cuts don't expire. And so this is our best shot to get this included, and our two sponsors are working really hard on it, as are our two associations and our members.
You mentioned that tool. More information to come, or how can dealers get involved?
Well, we're going to put it on our website. Dealers will also be getting an email, and we will also be putting it in our e-newsletters, RV Executive Today online, as well as RVDA News Brief that comes out every Wednesday. So we expect that tool to be launched in just a matter of days here. And timing is important because these tax committees are already working on the bill, and we're fortunate that Representative Yakum is on Ways and Means now, which is a great thing for the industry on a lot of issues, but especially this one, which is a tax issue.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, can I ask a question here?
Of course.
What my coming off a leadership conference last week, and we've heard this and that, but not so much a program or a detail of the event itself. What were your takeaways from the hallway conversations where the real things get tossed around? What were your takeaways from that event in the big picture?
Sure, I'll say, cautious optimism, right? I think right before the conference, or the week of, we released our new forecast that increased the forecast to 350,000 units shipped. So, but certainly some concern, I think, from around the uncertainty in Washington, right? We were at the leadership conference on Tuesday when the Canadian-Mexican tariffs went into effect, and we were there Tuesday and I think Wednesday when they were put on pause again. Obviously, some tariffs went into effect today. So, there was a question at one of the panels that was like, when will there be a little bit more stability, for lack of a better term? And I think, what we talked about is like, this has been the shock to the system has been part of the stated goal of the administration, right? And so it's not necessarily a surprise, but that's how I would sum up those conversations: cautiously optimistic, but some concern about the uncertainty in Washington, and kind of the whiplash back and forth.
Yeah, and
Right.
Phil, you had a board meeting too, right?
Yeah, we had a board meeting, and we had representatives of Canada with us at the board meeting, and they talked about, the double whammy that they're going to be up against. It's not only tariffs, but the strong dollar has really eaten into the Canadian dollar, and so buying anything from the U.S. is very expensive for Canadians, and depending on the year, shipments to Canada by the industry are between 30 and 40,000 units. And, so that's something that we have to consider as well. We need to have a strong manufacturing base in the U.S. and certainly, we don't want to see any kind of problems there where it impacts the U.S. manufacturers.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah, we saw, Sherm talked with Shane Devenish this morning, and saw Eleanor Ham out there in Phoenix last week. And as Sherm said, they're both very passionate about this particular issue on behalf of their members, and understandably so.
Right. And there's a history of cooperation between Canadian dealers and U.S. dealers. And I know the U.S. manufacturers are members of CRVA in many instances. So it's something that we need to stay unified. We think that we'll be able to keep that unity up, but it is definitely a very sober situation, I would say, for the Canadians right now.
Yeah, and from the RVIA point of view, we're in pretty consistent communication with both of our Canadian association partners. And, I think for us, it's continuing to tell the story, right? Continue to tell of the potential impact. To Phil's point, last year was about 30,000 units shipped to Canada, worth well north of $1 billion, right? And so that impacts not only the ability, the health of Canadian dealers and the ability of Canadians to purchase RVs, but it absolutely impacts our manufacturer members and our supplier members. And so it behooves us, to Phil's point, to continue to work closely together, all four associations. And we're certainly doing that to continue to tell the story of the impact to the industry.
Certainly a time we'll all remember. To leave it at that.
I think that's a good way to sum it up.
Well, one of the panel discussions at the leadership conference, Jason, you were the moderator for it, but it was all about government affairs. You had some key members of your team there, as well as Jessica Wall-Turner from Outdoor Recreation Roundtable.
Yep.
To me, the takeaway from that is, given the current political climate, we got to stick to our core message, but tailor it to the audience that you're speaking with. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And while that may be more important right now, that's always true with advocacy, right? The key is what are you trying to accomplish? What are we trying to accomplish on behalf of our members? And how do you talk to people? When young people come to me for professional advice, I always tell them most people can learn enough about an issue to be an effective lobbyist. But if you don't like telling a story and building relationships and connecting with people, you should probably find something else to do. And that's what it's really about, right? And figuring out, you can take any issue, take outdoor recreation, take floor plan, take tariffs, whatever it may be, and you're always going to approach it differently with different audiences. And that's certainly not unique to government affairs. It's true of sales and a lot of other professions. But the fact is, you don't have two of the same conversations over and over again. You're always looking for, how does this X issue relate to this person? And how do we make that connection? And that is, at the core of it, within the uncertainty and kind of the minute by minute, hour by hour changes that we're seeing in Washington, staying true to what the association and our members are focused on and carrying that message forward is really important. And I think the other thing that we as a team, as an association, always talk about is like, yeah, we would like solutions faster than maybe sometimes Congress or a state legislature will move, but it's really important to do the work to build the story, talk about the impact, talk about the importance, so that when the opportunity arises to tackle a solution and to accomplish a solution, then we've done the work on the front end to get us into that point where we can be successful.
Well, I think we need to end with one of our favorite topics to talk about, and that is the Golden State, California. Geez, Jason, I'm trying to remember what you said about somehow being a thorn in our side, but that would be not exactly politically correct to say it out loud. Too late. No, both of you, if you don't mind, from your perspectives, what's the latest with the California Air Resources Board?
Yeah, so we remain engaged with CARB on mostly around the Advanced Clean Trucks rule, which is the requirement for, and it falls on chassis manufacturers, that regulation to produce zero emission chassis, and if not, then to either buy credits so that they can continue to produce ICE chassis, or to use the carry forward provision that allows them to continue to build ICE chassis as long as they remedy it with credits or ZEV chassis after 3 years. So we continue to be engaged with them and have conversations with them. At the same time, we are talking to manufacturers and working with our partners at RVDA to be gauging the impact, right, of this regulation on the availability of motorhomes in California.
So
Um,
it's still alive. It's still a live topic here.
Absolutely. And it's in effect. And so it is something, and I know I can speak for our members. Our members are having conversations and have been having conversation with their chassis suppliers about availability. And there's no one size fits all from the chassis manufacturers about how they are approaching this regulation, whether they are not building for our industry, buying credits, using the carry forward or anything like that. At the same time, this provision is coming into play in 5 other states this year. And so there are efforts, I should say, in all of those states to push back the implementation deadline. And that's important. It's not about exempting the RV industry or anything like that. It's about pushing back the implementation deadline so it's a more feasible timeline for our industry and other medium and heavy duty industries. And then kind of the third aspect of this is the administrator of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, announced about a few months ago, maybe a month ago. Time's kind of a flat circle right now, guys. I'm not going to lie. But that the EPA would be submitting to Congress these waivers for review under the Congressional Review Act. So I think most people know California has a Clean Air Act waiver from the EPA to regulate automobiles and vehicles at a higher standard than EPA does the regulation. But each actual action that they take requires an individual waiver. So Clean Cars 2, which was focused on auto, requires a separate waiver. ACT, Advanced Clean Trucks, also requires a separate waiver. So the administration and many Republicans in Congress would like to revoke those individual waivers using the Congressional Review Act. I won't bore everybody with the legalese, but it will, if they move forward on this, it will be subject to lawsuits because it's not clear that you can use the CRA on a waiver. Some people claim it's not a rule. Some people claim it is. That's not for us to decide. But there is going to be that effort probably in Congress on both the Advanced Clean Trucks rule and the low NOx omnibus rule, which targets engines, as well as Clean Cars, which targets autos. And that would impact, if that goes through, that impacts not only California, but all those states that follow California, including those 5 that are moving forward on ACT as we speak. So it's a complicated issue, remains a complicated issue. It's something we remain highly engaged on. Again, working closely with RVDA on that. And certainly we'll be monitoring that legislation in Congress when it's introduced.
Yeah, just a word. The dealers have also had some separate meetings with CARB. They're trying to educate the staff on, the usage patterns of RVs. They're not being used like a work truck every day, driving down the highway, things like that, so that CARB understands that, motorhomes are a pretty niche part of this whole rule, and that it's really not appropriate that they're included. Whether they're getting much traction there, I don't know, but at least the dialogue is going on and it's an open communication with CARB because they do have their own ability to set rules, at least right now, and we've got to keep that line of communication open with the staff at Cal Air Resources Board.
Absolutely.
Bill, are you having your dealers in those affected states? I know some have been very involved in contacting their Congress people. Is that something that you would ask them to do?
Well, yeah, I think right now a lot of the action is bills in the state legislatures to extend it.
Right.
So as those bills advance in those 5 states, is it five, Jason?
Yeah, 5 states. Yeah.
Yeah, the dealers will be asked to support those bills as they move.
Okay. Okay. So stay tuned, huh?
Yeah, and those efforts are largely being led by the American Trucking Association and their state affiliates. To Phil's point, right? We're talking about us a niche product that isn't used nearly as much as long haul truckers or school buses or anything like that, where the impact is much greater.
Okay. One of the other topics that was pretty important that was discussed at the GA panel discussion was, and that was actually, it was Jessica Turner, about how she's been able to move the needle on a little bit anyway on the National Park Service workforce, firings, layoffs, terminations, whatever you want to call it. I mean, obviously, between the four of us and everybody else watching, people like to go to national parks. They like to enjoy their vacations. And if there aren't enough employees, that vacation could be at risk, I would say.
And
Phil, you
from
were
a,
just, go ahead.
and from a commercial standpoint, for a moment, it's a key part of the audience of the recreation vehicle industry,
Absolutely.
where they tend to stay.
Yep.
What's the one of the things that Jessica said, and this is wonderful, is as soon as she can establish that outdoor connection with whatever congressperson she's in front of, she's almost always able to move a little bit more of that needle. Phil, you were just telling us a little bit ago that there was a recent outdoor recreation roundtable executive meeting. What was the message from there?
Well, the messaging is that, the essential services are supposed to be maintained. That's the position of the administration, which is a reasonable position to hold. What we need to make the case is that essential services include the ability to get in the park in a timely manner, to make reservations at campgrounds in advance so that the campground reservation systems are up and running, and that trash and
To
toilets
maintain
are
them.
cleaned and maintained. Those are essential services. And, the Park Service did say that they are bringing on seasonal workers. So that's all steps in the right direction. But we got to make sure that they understand that those are essential services for enjoyment of the parks.
And I think it's important to think about it from the way I think about it is, say you're new to our lifestyle. You bought an RV maybe last fall, and this is going to be your first summer season with it, and you're going to a national park or two, and you get there. First of all, it's been very hard to make a reservation, as Phil said, on a campground. We see that happening right now in some of our national parks. You get there and the line is, instead of 30 minutes, it's 2 hours, because we've gone from two people collecting entrance fees, never mind that that's money that goes to the park and the park service, to one. And so you're already behind schedule, and you get to the campground and it hasn't been maintained, and the trash is overflowing, and restrooms aren't working, or whatever it may be. That's a risk. Not only that's a risk to our industry, because there's less incentive maybe to stay in the lifestyle and continuously upgrade your unit, right? And things like that. And it's not just about the national parks, or I should note the national forests, which also saw mass layoffs. The fact is, it's the surrounding communities, right? We've learned from previous government shutdowns how much the gateway communities to these public lands rely on people visiting the public land. So that's guide shops, that's hospitality and restaurants, RV parks that are in these gateway communities, right? Which all could be negatively impacted. And so it's a big concern for both of our associations. Absolutely, hiring seasonal folks is important, but I know of at least one park where one of the layoffs was the person who does the hiring and vetting of the seasonal people. right? So how much value do you get from pushing seasonal people at that park when there's nobody there to onboard them and hire them and things like that? So it is a concern. Obviously, the focus is the summer season, absolutely. But spring break time is the height of the season for Big Bend National Park, way down in Texas. You probably don't want to be there in July. It's about 197 degrees, but it's still probably cool. But we're talking about, certainly the summer season is the high season, but we're already going to start seeing, we already are seeing these impacts.
Very good. Very good. Well, Sherman, I think we've covered the waterfront with them. Like I said, should we let them off the hook now?
I think it's really well advised that we leave them off the hook at this point.
Okay. Phil, Jason, can't thank you guys enough. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having us. Good to see you both.
Thank you.